Welcome to another deep dive. You sent us, well, quite a stack of material articles, research papers, notes, all zeroing in on the Phoenix Lights.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the most talked about mass sightings out there, isn't it? Really a cornerstone case for the UAP community.
Absolutely. So, our mission today, yours and mine, is to unpack all this source material you've gathered. We want to pull out the key bits of evidence, look at things from different angles.
And really help you get a solid handle on what might have happened that night
Mhm.
and, why it's still such a hot topic, even after all this time.
Because it's definitely not simple. We're talking thousands of witnesses spanning, what, several states?
Arizona, Nevada, even reports from Mexico, and two very different events happening hours apart.
Right. Plus the official explanations, which have their own issues when you dig in.
And powerful counterarguments, witness accounts that just don't fit neatly. And then there's the whole Governor Symington angle, his admission later on.
That was a bombshell, wasn't it? Okay, so prepare to look closely at the details with us. This requires attention. Let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's set the scene. We're talking Thursday, March 13th, 1997. A pretty typical calm desert evening across Arizona.
Yeah, clear skies mostly. The kind of night you might actually be looking up anyway, which is interesting in itself.
But things got unusual. This wasn't just a Phoenix thing initially, right? The reports stretched way beyond the city.
Oh, yeah. The whole thing unfolded over a good few hours. Started roughly, 7:30 p.m. Mountain Time, and went on, off and on, until maybe 10:30 p.m.
And geographically huge. The sources mention a path of maybe 300, 350 miles, southeast trajectory generally.
Exactly. So you're looking at potentially thousands of people across that huge area seeing something out of the ordinary during that window.
And the reaction was pretty immediate, wasn't it? Media frenzy.
Totally. It kicked off a media sensation almost right away. News stations were flooded with calls. People were demanding answers like, what did we just see?
But the answers weren't exactly forthcoming, were they? At least not initially.
No, and that's a really crucial point. The initial official response was, well, slow and kind of confusing. Local military bases like Luke Air Force Base near Phoenix initially denied knowing anything about it.
Which creates a vacuum, right? If officials aren't talking or saying nothing to see here.
Exactly. That lack of a quick, clear, comprehensive explanation just fueled speculation. It basically opened the door for independent researchers, civilian groups, everyone to start digging. And that delay allowed all sorts of alternative ideas to take root.
Ideas like secret military tech or
The other big one.
extraterrestrial craft, yeah. That delay is a big reason why the mysteries solidify, why it didn't just fade away as unexplained lights.
Okay, now this is super important, something the sources really hammer home and you see get mixed up all the time in casual discussion.
You have to separate the events.
Right. It wasn't just one thing. The Phoenix Lights actually involved two distinct types of sightings, hours apart, different characteristics.
Absolutely critical point. If you conflate them, you end up misapplying explanations. It muddies the water completely. So, event number one, this is the one that gets most of the high strangeness buzz, right? The big one.
That's the one. Reports describe this massive object, usually V-shaped or triangular, sometimes called a boomerang shape.
Or that specific carpenter square description comes up a lot.
Yeah, implying a rigid, definite angle. And the key descriptions here are colossal size, apparently solid structure, and this is huge, almost total silence, gliding across the state, northwest to southeast.
Okay, so that's the first event, roughly 7:30 to maybe 8:45 p.m. Then later.
Much later. Hours later, you get event number two. This was different. A series of bright lights, orbs, often amber or orange.
And these were seen mainly where?
Primarily over the Phoenix area itself. Lots of reports mention them being near the Sierra Estrella Mountains, which are southwest of the city.
And their behavior was different too, not gliding across the state.
No, these were described as stationary, sort of hovering or maybe slowly falling, descending towards the horizon. Got it. So huge, silent V shape, cruising the state early on. Then hours later, bright orbs hanging or falling over Phoenix.
Exactly. Two distinct things. And you can see why it's vital to keep them separate, right? If someone trying to explain the silent, mile-wide V-shape by talking about military flares,
It just doesn't match the description at all.
not even close, and vice versa. An explanation for distant flares doesn't touch the descriptions of the V passing low and silent overhead. You need different explanations, or you have to accept something truly weird was happening with that first event.
Which makes investigating it a nightmare, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. I've got thousands of witness accounts gathered over time, varying wildly in quality and detail. You've got descriptions that sound impossible,
Then the official explanations come out later, trying to fit everything into known boxes.
and strong counter-arguments based on witness testimony that just won't fit those boxes. Plus, the sheer passage of time makes it harder. It's a massive puzzle with missing pieces and conflicting clues. Okay, let's dive into those eyewitness accounts then. Starting with that first event, the V shape. This is where the core mystery really lies for a lot of people. Roughly 7.3 to 8.45 p.m. MST.
Right. The story of its path is basically stitched together from reports all along that northwest to southeast line.
Some sources trace the first reports even earlier, out in Nevada, near Henderson.
Yeah, around 7:55 p.m. Mountain Time, which would be 6:55 p.m. Pacific out there. One early account described a big V shape, maybe 747 size, 6 lights, moving southeast.
And interestingly, that Nevada report mentioned a sound like rushing wind.
It did, which is notable because as it moved into Arizona, the overwhelming majority of witnesses stressed the opposite total silence.
So right away, a contradiction or maybe a different perception or maybe not even the same object.
It's a puzzle. Could be atmospheric conditions, distance perception, or maybe the Nevada sighting was something related but distinct. But the silence becomes a dominant theme in Arizona.
Okay, so moving into Arizona, near Paulden, maybe 8.15 p.m., there's an account from a former police officer.
Yes. He saw reddish-orange lights, a cluster 4+1 trailing, and he noted something specific through binoculars. Each light looked like 2 separate points of light close together. They headed south.
2 points of light. Keep that detail in mind, folks. It'll come back later when we talk explanations.
Definitely. Then, a bit further southeast, Prescott Valley. Around 8:77 p.m., this area gave us some incredibly detailed, really compelling sightings.
The Lay family account is one of the most famous, isn't it?
It really is. Tim Lee and his family were outside. He saw 5 lights first, thought maybe hot air balloons, but they kept coming, moving together.
And as they got closer, they realized it wasn't balloons.
Not at all. They resolved into that distinct upside-down V. But here's the kicker, the part that makes their account so critical. They said as it got closer, maybe only a couple of miles out, they could see a solid structure behind the lights.
A solid structure, not just lights.
No. Tim Lee described it like a 60-degree carpenter square. Dark, maybe metallic looking, lights at the point and along the edges.
Wow. That changes things dramatically from just seeing lights.
Absolutely. And it gets even more astonishing. They estimated it passed directly over them, maybe only 100 to 150 feet up.
Just low and silent?
Completely silent, moving incredibly slowly, almost hovering, before it passed through a V-shaped gap in the nearby mountains. Think about that. Something apparently huge, solid, structured, that low, making no sound. That's profoundly anomalous.
And there were others in Prescott Valley seeing similar things. The Kaiser family.
Right, around the same time, John Kaiser and his family saw a triangular pattern, red lights, white nose light coming from the west-northwest, watched it with binoculars.
And they also mentioned structure.
Yes. Passed right over them, banked smoothly to the right, disappeared southeast, silent, low altitude. And crucially, they and other callers from that area reported it was solid and blotted out the stars as it went overhead.
Blotting out the stars, that detail comes up again and again, doesn't it?
It does. It implies something opaque, substantial, and large enough to obscure the background sky. Not just points of light. That's powerful testimony suggesting a physical object of significant size.
So from Prescott, it continues southeast towards Phoenix, reaching the metro area around 8.3, 8.45 p.m. And the number of witnesses just explodes.
Understandably. More people to see it. Reports from Glendale, northwest of Phoenix, described it passing overhead, maybe higher altitude there, partly obscured by clouds, but still clearly a V shape.
And this is when Kurt Russell saw it, the actor.
Yep. And he's an experienced pilot, which adds weight. He was flying his son into Sky Harbor Airport, saw the V formation, couldn't identify it.
He reported it to air traffic control.
He did, later called it a UFO unidentified flying object, which, coming from a pilot, is significant. Pilots know aircraft if they can't identify something.
It suggests it's genuinely unusual. Their testimony is often seen as more credible in these cases.
Definitely. Then there's the Ozma Linderman account, also from the Phoenix area, around 8.1, another incredibly vivid one.
What did she describe?
She was adamant. One solid craft. She stressed how perfectly spaced the lights were, and crucially, that there was a void clearly between the lights that blacked out the stars. Again, that blotting out stars' detail.
Solid craft, blocking stars, consistent theme.
Very consistent. And her account adds another layer of strangeness. She said it seemed to slow down, maybe hover, lights turned red, and then it shot straight up and disappeared. Gone. Completely gone.
Shot straight up. Silently.
Apparently.
Mm.
That kind of rapid, silent, vertical acceleration is, well, not something conventional aircraft do. It's another one of those details that pushes it into the truly anomalous category for many researchers.
We also have another pilot account, right? An unnamed commercial pilot.
Yeah, 29 years experience, driving home in Phoenix, saw lights he just couldn't figure out, said it was moving too slow for an airliner on approach.
And the sound.
No noise. Again, the silence. He found that baffling for something that looked large. He also questioned why landing lights would be pointed straight down like that. More trained observer testimony highlighting anomalous features.
Even less dramatic accounts, like the trucker Gary Morris, reinforced the strangeness.
Right. He saw the lights around 8:45 p.m. moving southeast out of Phoenix. Said they were something different, distinct from any normal lights he'd seen before.
Okay, so let's try to pull together the key characteristics from all these witness accounts of the V shape. What are the consistent threads?
Well, the consistency itself is maybe the most powerful thread. People hundreds of miles apart, not talking to each other, describing incredibly similar things in real time or shortly after. That suggests a shared stimulus, something real.
The shape being the most obvious one. Overwhelmingly, V, triangle, or that Carpenter's square, a specific geometric form.
Right, not just a random blob. Then size. Estimates vary wildly, which is normal but consistently huge.
Sure.
747 size football fields, mile wide.
And the evidence for that size often being its ability to block out stars, the perceived solidity.
Exactly. Not just lights, but something opaque behind or between them. That's a critical distinction reported by those who felt they got a closer look.
Lights were typically 5 to 7, often amber, reddish, orange, or white on the object's outline. Some saw weirder things like swimming light canisters or an undulating belly.
But the standout feature, the one that really challenges conventional explanations,
The sight.
profound silence, reported again and again, even when witnesses felt it was extremely low. Maybe a faint hum reported by a few, but overwhelmingly silent. That's just not how large aircraft, especially jets, operate at low altitude. The Nevada rushing wind report remains an outlier.
And its movement. Slow, gliding, deliberate, sometimes hovering.
Yeah, but also capable of smooth banks and, according to Linderman, that impossible-sounding silent vertical acceleration. And it covered over 300 miles in about an hour, which implies significant speed over distance, yet appeared slow overhead. Another paradox.
So why do these accounts matter so much? Why focus on them?
Because the convergence of these specific, unusual details from independent, geographically separated witnesses, especially before media saturation, is strong subjective evidence for something genuinely anomalous.
The credibility of some witnesses helps two pilots, former police.
Right. People trained to observe, less likely perhaps to misidentify mundane things. Their inability to identify it, or their descriptions of behavior that violates known physics or aerodynamics for conventional craft, is evidence.
And the interaction with the environment blocking stars, the low passes, suggests a physical object, not just an illusion or distant lights.
Exactly. These are the core pieces of evidence that make the V-shaped phenomenon so compelling and difficult to explain away easily for those who take the witness account seriously.
Okay, that's the V-shape. Let's shift now to the second act of the night. The stationary orbs. Hours later.
Right, a completely different beast, seemingly. Occurring mainly over the Phoenix area, many reports centering on the view towards the Sierra Estrella Mountains, southwest of the city.
And the timing here was later, around 9.15, 9.3 dm, maybe more widely, around 10.00 dm.
Yeah, sources differ slightly, but definitely later in the evening, well after the V-shape had passed through.
And the descriptions are different. Bright lights, often in a line or arc.
But not moving across the state. These were seen as hovering or maybe slowly falling, descending.
This is the part that got caught on video more famously, right?
Yes. Michael Kresius's video is probably the most well-known footage associated with the Phoenix lights, showing these later orbs. Other videos exist too, and this visual evidence becomes a focal point for both sides of the argument.
How did these lights behave?
Witnesses described them staying lit for a bit, burning brightly, then dimming or winking out, sometimes one after another down the line. And many reported them disappearing as if they dropped behind those Sierra Estrella Mountains.
Okay, so again, emphasizing the distinction. This second event, later time, different location focus, Phoenix Mountains, different appearance, bright orbs, different behavior, hovering, falling, seems fundamentally separate from the early V-shape.
Absolutely crucial. You can't understand the Phoenix lights properly without treating these as two distinct incidents, potentially with two different causes.
Which brings us to the explanations. What did the officials eventually say? Because it took a while, right?
It did. Weeks, even months, for a comprehensive picture to emerge publicly. As pressure mounted from the public, media, and groups like MUFON collecting reports.
The military finally offered an explanation. Operation Snowbird.
Right. That was the framework. Routine military training exercises under Operation Snowbird, which involved Air National Guard units training in Arizona. And they offered a bifurcated explanation, one for the V-shape, one for the orbs.
Okay, so for the V-shape, the big silent thing seen across the state earlier, what was the official line?
They identified it as a flight of 5 A-10 Thunderbolt II jets, Warthogs.
5 separate planes.
Yes, flying in a V formation, supposedly returning to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base down near Tucson after a training mission.
And they were flying differently, not standard lights.
They claimed the jets were flying under VFR visual flight rules and using steady formation lights, not the usual blinking anti-collision lights. The idea was that from the ground, far away, these 5 steady lights looked like one single V-shaped object.
And the timing.
The timing fit reasonably well. The 10 supposedly landed around 8:45 p.m., which matches when the V-shaped sightings were ending over Phoenix.
Now, was there any witness corroboration for this specific explanation?
Yes, and this is important evidence for the official story regarding the first event. Mitch Stanley, the amateur astronomer in Scottsdale. He looked through his telescope that night.
And saw what?
He identified them as a squadron of fighter planes. Said, under magnification, each light split into 2 consistent with wingtip lights, and the planes looked small, suggesting high altitude. His observation directly supports the A-10 formation theory for the V-shape.
Okay, so that's the explanation for the V-shape.
Yeah.
5 A-10s in formation. Now, what about the later orbs? The 10:00 p.m. lights over Phoenix.
For those, the official explanation was military flares, specifically LU-2BB high-intensity illumination flares.
Dropped by A-10s as well.
Yes, but a different squadron of A-10s. This time, the Maryland Air National Guard's 104th Fighter Squadron, also there for Operation Snowbird.
And where were these flares dropped over Phoenix?
No, crucially, they said the flares were dropped over the Barry M. Goldwater Air Force Range. That's a huge military range southwest of Phoenix, maybe 50 to 70 miles away from the city.
So how does that explain lights seen over Phoenix?
The explanation relies on the characteristics of the flares and perspective. These LU-2 flares deploy on parachutes, they burn incredibly brightly, and they descend slowly.
The heat creates lift, right? It makes them seem to hang there.
Exactly. The heat makes a sort of balloon effect on the chute, slowing the descent, making them appear almost stationary or hovering when viewed from a long distance like 50, 70 miles.
And their disappearance.
Attributed to them burning out and falling below the line of sight, created by the Sierra Estrella Mountains, which sit between Phoenix and the Goldwater Range. So from Phoenix, it looked like they just vanished behind the mountains.
Was there confirmation for this flare drop?
Yes, significant confirmation came later. In 2017, Lieutenant Colonel Ed Jones from the Maryland Air National Guard confirmed he was one of the pilots who dropped flares over the Goldwater Range that night, March 13, 1997.
Direct military confirmation. That's pretty strong.
It is. Plus, there were local TV reports comparing videos of military flare drops to the Phoenix Lights orb footage, showing visual similarities. And analyses suggested the brightness of these flares is consistent with what was seen, even from that distance. So the flare explanation for the second event has substantial backing.
Okay, so the official story seems neat. A-10s for the V, flares for the orbs. Case closed.
Well, not quite. This is where the scrutiny really kicks in. The official story provides a framework, but it runs into serious conflicts with a lot of the eyewitness testimony, especially for that first V-shaped event. It becomes a credibility contest.
Let's break down those conflicts. V-shape versus A-10s. What are the main problems?
The biggest one, hands down, is the silence.
Right. A-10s are loud, 5 of them flying low. Should be deafening.
Exactly. Yet witness after witness, including those who thought it was very low, like the Lays, 100 to 150 feet, reported profound silence or maybe a faint hum. How do you reconcile 5 loud jets with near total silence reported by so many people? It's the single biggest hurdle for the A-10 theory.
Then there's the size and structure issue.
Yes. People weren't just describing 5 lights. Many described a single, massive, solid object, mile wide, blotting out stars, the Lay family's Carpenter Square structure seen up close.
That perception of a unified colossal structure is hard to square with 5 individual jets, even in formation.
It really is. Mick Stanley's distant telescopic view saw planes, yes, key evidence for the A10 theory. But does that invalidate the close-range accounts describing something vastly different? Or were they seeing different things? The consistency of the solid structure-blocking stars detail from witnesses along the path, very compelling evidence against just distant lights.
And the reported maneuvers, hovering, sharp turns, that vertical shot upwards.
Not typical A10 behavior, especially not in transit or formation flight. Silent hovering, extreme slowness for the size, sudden vertical acceleration. These descriptions don't align well with known A10 capabilities or standard operating procedures.
Okay, so significant challenges for the A10 explanation of the V shape. What about the orbs versus flares explanation for the later event? That seems stronger.
It's generally considered more plausible, but it still faces some challenges based on witness accounts and other claims.
Like duration. Flares only burn for so long, right?
Correct. LUU-2BB flares have a specified burn time. Some witnesses reported the lights being visible for longer than that typical duration. And reports of lights dimming, then reappearing in formation, or holding a very stable hover pattern beyond typical burn times, seem inconsistent with flares descending on parachutes.
And the formation itself. Would flares stay in such a perfect pattern?
Some witnesses described a highly stable patterned array. They argue that flares, even dropped together, would drift independently on wind currents, however slight, causing more scatter or changes in relative position over time than what they perceived. They saw something too organized, too stable.
There are also safety concerns mentioned.
Yeah, some witnesses, including that commercial pilot, questioned the safety of dropping flares even 50, 70 miles away if they appear to be much closer, potentially over or near populated areas from their perspective. The perceived proximity versus the actual location is a point of friction.
And wasn't there some claim about spectral analysis of the orb videos?
Yes, researchers like Jim Dilatoso claimed analysis showed light characteristics inconsistent with military flares. But, and this is a big caveat, these analyses often lack independent verification, peer review, or access to the raw data and methods used. So, while the claim exists as a challenge, its scientific weight is debatable without more rigorous validation.
Beyond the specifics of the explanations, the way the whole thing was handled officially caused suspicion too, right? The delays.
Absolutely. The months-long delay in getting a comprehensive official story out definitely fueled distrust and speculation about a cover-up for many. Why wait so long if it was just routine training?
And the initial denials from Luke AFB, the closest base, added to the confusion.
Right. They initially said they saw nothing, knew nothing. Then later the explanation involves other bases further away, Davis Monthan, and ranges even further away, Goldwater. It raised questions about internal communication or maybe deliberate compartmentalization or misdirection.
But the biggest blow to getting definitive answers, the real missing piece, seems to be the radar data.
Oh, absolutely critical. FAA radar data from that night could have been the objective smoking gun, one way or another.
It could track speed, altitude, number of objects, maybe even give a sense of size?
Potentially. It could have shown 5 distinct fast-moving targets matching the A10 profile, or one massive slow-moving target matching the anomalous V-shaped descriptions. It could have shown flare-like descents over the Goldwater range. It was the key objective data needed.
Yeah, but it was lost.
Routinely deleted. Apparently, no official body, not the FAA itself, not the military, nobody requested the relevant tapes be preserved within the standard 2-week retention period. So, poof, gone forever.
Why wasn't it saved? Oversight, lack of interest, something else.
We don't know for sure. Was it just bureaucratic bungling? A sign nobody took the public report seriously enough initially to preserve potential evidence? Or was there a reason someone didn't want that data preserved? We can only speculate, but its loss is a major, major hole in the investigation. It means we're stuck relying on subjective accounts and explanations made after the fact without that crucial objective check. It guarantees the mystery endures, in many ways.
Okay, so the evidence is messy, contradictory, key data missing. Let's talk about the people who've really shaped how we understand this event. The investigators, the witnesses, the skeptics.
Yeah, their stories and perspectives are crucial to understanding the ongoing debate.
Dr. Lynn Kitei stands out, a physician who became a key witness and researcher.
Exactly. She saw and photographed these objects, V-shapes, delta shapes, from her home. It turned her from a UFO skeptic into someone who felt compelled to investigate.
She dedicated years to it, right? Wrote a book, made a documentary.
Yeah. The Phoenix Lights, A Skeptic's Discovery That We Are Not Alone, and the film Phoenix Lights, beyond top secret. Her approach was very meticulous, documenting witness accounts from all walks of life, civilians, pilots, even military folks off the record, and importantly, Governor Symington. She brought a kind of clinical eye to compiling the evidence.
Her medical background probably lent credibility for some people.
I think so. She wasn't coming from a lifelong UFO background initially. Her work is really central to the argument for an anomalous explanation, focusing heavily on the breadth and depth of the witness testimony.
But the figure who really changed the game, arguably, was former Governor Fife Symington.
His story is just remarkable. From public ridiculer to crucial witness.
That infamous press conference in June '97 with the alien costume.
Yeah, that was widely seen as dismissive, trivializing. He brought out his chief of staff in an alien mask, joked about it, said it was probably flares. It really set a tone of official non-seriousness.
Which probably shut down some witnesses, made them hesitant to speak up.
Very likely. But then, years later, maybe around 2007, after he was out of office, the bombshell.
He admitted he saw something himself that night.
He did. Said he went out to do a peek in Phoenix because people were reporting things, and he saw it too. And what he saw was not flares.
What did he describe?
A massive craft. V-shaped or carpenter's square-shaped. He used words like enormous, mystifying, bigger than anything I've ever seen, and crucially, otherworldly.
And he's a pilot, too.
Yes, former Air Force pilot. He explicitly said, I know just about every machine that flies. It couldn't have been flares because it was too symmetrical. He called it a craft of unknown origin.
Coming from a former governor, an experienced pilot who initially mocked the whole thing, that's powerful.
Immensely powerful. It lent huge credibility to all the other witnesses describing a large, structured, anomalous craft. It basically validated their experiences in a way nothing else could.
Did he say why he kept quiet initially, besides the ridicule?
He mentioned he was under federal indictment at the time on unrelated charges and worried admitting seeing a UFO would just add to his problems, make him seem unstable, or open him to more attacks.
He also claimed he asked officials about it back in '97. Luke AFB commander, state police, National Guard, and they were all perplexed, couldn't explain it.
Which clashes with the later definitive military explanation, raising questions about what was known internally when. Symington's testimony is a cornerstone for the unexplained side of the argument.
Of course, you have strong, skeptical voices pushing back, supporting the official line.
Definitely. Robert Schieffer, a well-known skeptic, consistently argues for the A-10s and flares explanation. Full stop.
And Mitch Stanley, the astronomer whose observation supports the A-10 theory for the first event, is key evidence for the skeptics.
Absolutely. His account is crucial for that side. And writers like Matthew Henley at the Phoenix New Times strongly advocate for the conventional explanation, citing Stanley, flare comparisons, and so on.
People like Mick West, known for debunking UAP videos using detailed analysis, represent the skeptical approach to the visual evidence, like the flare videos, trying to show mundane explanations.
Right. Their methodology focuses on rigorous analysis against known phenomena. Even if they haven't published specifically on the '97 footage in our sources, that type of skeptical analysis is applied.
Other figures pop up too. Dr. Bruce Maccabee, the physicist and ufologist, endorsed Keaty's work. Jim Delatoso made those spectral analysis claims with the caveats we mentioned.
And former Councilwoman Frances Barwood, who pushed for answers early on, taking political risks. And groups like MUFON doing the initial legwork, collecting reports.
And the comet Hale-Bopp being visible is often mentioned.
Yeah, it explains why more people might have been looking up, increasing the witness pool. But not what they saw necessarily. Interestingly, even MUFON doesn't seem to have one single official stance covering everything that night, maybe reflecting the complexity.
Okay, so pulling it all together, let's revisit the main theories and why none seem to be a perfect fit for everything reported.
Right. Theory 1, the official military explanation. V-shape, A-10s, backed by Stanley. Orbs, flares, backed by Jones. Luminosity, video comparisons.
Challenges: silence, size, structure maneuvers of the V-shape versus A-10s, duration, stability, reappearance issues for orbs versus flares, lost radar data, witness credibility.
Theory 2, extraterrestrial hypothesis. The V-shape, maybe the orbs too, were ET craft. Support comes from the V-shape's anomalous descriptions, silent, huge, structured, weird maneuvers, Symington's otherworldly testimony, Cuddy's research.
Challenges: no definitive physical proof, no undeniable visual evidence that rules out all conventional explanations. Skeptics always point to potential misperception.
Theory 3, experimental military aircraft. The V-shape was secret U.S. tech, like a stealth blimp or advanced LTA, explains silence and size terrestrially.
Challenges. Why test over a major city? Why no leaks or declassification decades later? Still speculative.
Theory 4. Mass misidentification psychological phenomena. People misidentified planes, stars, flares, etc., may be influenced by Hale-Bopp sightings and media buzz. Suggestion, hysteria.
Challenges. Doesn't easily explain the specific, consistent details of the V-shaped size, silence, structure blocking stars from credible, independent witnesses before media saturation. Doesn't explain trained observers being baffled.
And Theory 5. Elaborate hoax. Someone faked it all.
Challenges. Scale is just too big. Thousands of witnesses, 300 plus miles, hours, two distinct events. An undetected hoax of that complexity seems incredibly unlikely.
So you see the problem. No single theory tidily wraps up all the evidence from both events without contradiction or leaving major questions. It suggests maybe multiple things were happening, maybe the official story is incomplete, or maybe we just don't understand what occurred.
Which leads us to the legacy. Why are we still talking about this, analyzing these sources over 25 years later?
Because the core contradictions remain unresolved, and the evidence for anomaly, especially concerning the V-shape, remains compelling to many.
Recap the core tension.
V-shape. Consistent witness accounts of a huge, silent, solid craft, plus trained observers baffled, plus Governor Symington's testimony, versus the official A10 explanation supported by Stanley's distant view.
Orbs. Official flare explanation backed by military confirmation and analysis versus witness accounts of unusual duration stability and those unverified spectral claims.
The mystery persists because volume and credibility of witnesses is high. The V-shaped descriptions are just extraordinary. The initial official handling bred distrust. Symington's testimony adds huge weight. Visual evidence is ambiguous or lacking, especially for the V. No definitive physical proofs exists. And the technical explanations often don't match the profound experience reported by witnesses.
It's a landmark case in ufology, right? Constantly referenced.
Absolutely. Drives documentaries, books, ongoing debate about UAP reality and disclosure.
So wrapping up the investigation based on these sources, what's the takeaway?
It's incredibly complex. The 10 p.m. orbs might be explainable as flares, though even that has lingering questions for some witnesses. But the earlier V-shaped object, the one described consistently as massive, silent, and structured by so many credible people, that's much, much harder to fit into the conventional A10 box without dismissing a vast amount of compelling testimony.
The lost radar data just compounds the problem, a failure of evidence collection.
Hugely. It forces us to grapple with subjective evidence more than we'd like. The Phoenix Lights really exemplifies the challenge of UAP investigation. You can't force one explanation onto potentially multiple phenomena. You have to weigh conflicting evidence carefully.
It really forces you, the listener, to weigh that evidence, the consistent, detailed, often credible witness accounts versus the official story and its own supporting points and weaknesses.
Which leads us to that final provocative thought for you to chew on, based on everything we've unpacked from these sources. Considering the sheer weight and consistency of the testimony about that early V-shaped object, its size, its silence, its structure, especially coming from trained observers, and ultimately corroborated by a former governor who saw it himself and called it a craft of unknown origin. Does that evidence, despite the lack of physical proof and lost radar data, convince you that at least part of what happened over Arizona that night points towards something truly beyond our current public understanding?
Whether that's incredibly advanced, secret human tech we still don't know about, or something else entirely.
Or does the ambiguity, the possibility of misperception, however unlikely it seems for some witnesses, and the existence of some corroboration for the official story, like Stanley's view, the flare confirmation, leave enough reasonable doubt for you? Can the conventional explanation still hold, despite the challenges?
The mystery endures because the evidence pulls in different directions, allowing for multiple, often conflicting interpretations. It challenges what we think we know.
And that concludes our deep dive into the Phoenix Lights. We've picked through the source material, contrasted the witness accounts for both main events, laid out the official explanations and the significant counterarguments, and looked at the key people involved.
Hopefully, this journey through the evidence has given you a much clearer, more nuanced understanding of why this case is so complex, so persistent, and so incredibly compelling within the study of unexplained aerial phenomena.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep digging into the evidence.